Let me start with a question that most people avoid answering honestly. How many decisions in your life are actually driven by guilt? Not intention, not alignment. Guilt. You say yes because you feel bad saying no. You help because you'd feel selfish if you didn't. You explain yourself because you don't want someone to feel hurt. You overextend because the idea of disappointing someone feels unbearable. And before you know it, guilt is quietly running your life. Not loudly, but constantly. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Guilt often disguises itself as kindness. You think you're being generous. You think you're being compassionate. You think you're being considerate. But underneath those behaviors, there's often a quieter motivation. I don't want to feel like a bad person. That's not generosity. That's emotional self-protection. And it's exhausting. March 2026 brings this pattern into sharp focus. Because we are in a universal year one, the year of identity, and we are now also in an Energy Body 3 month, the positive mind, which is decision, integrity, authority, and self-leadership, means the question this month is no longer, am I being nice? The question is, am I being honest with myself? Those are very different questions because guilt has a very specific function. Guilt tries to keep relationships stable by making you responsible for everyone's feelings. It whispers things like, you should help. You shouldn't say that. You're being selfish. You're going to upset them. You should do more. And if you don't challenge those whispers, they slowly become rules. Rules that say your needs come last. Your limits are negotiable. Your comfort is secondary. That's not kindness, that's conditioning. And if you've been someone who identifies as a people pleaser, a helper, a fixer, or the reliable one, this pattern will feel extremely familiar because guilt becomes the emotional signal that keeps you in line. Not external pressure, internal pressure. And internal pressure is far harder to resist. So today we are going to dismantle that pattern, not by becoming cold, not by becoming selfish, but by learning the difference between true compassion and guilt-driven behavior, because those two things are often confused. And once you see the difference, guilt loses its control. Now, if you're new here, hi, I'm Cherry. I'm a spiritual life coach, numerologist, and energy body teacher. And this space isn't about bypassing emotional patterns. It's about understanding them deeply enough that you can choose differently. And if you've ever thought, I know I need better boundaries, but I just feel so guilty when I try, then today's transmission is exactly for you. So take a breath here, because guilt is one of the most powerful emotional conditioning tools we carry. And once we unpack it, your decisions become much clearer. Let's talk about why guilt has so much influence over your decisions. Because guilt feels like truth. It feels like a signal that you've done something wrong. But most of the time, guilt is not about wrongdoing. It's about violating an internal rule you learned a long time ago. Rules like good people help. Good people don't disappoint others. Good people are always available. Good people put others first. These rules usually develop early in life. They often come from environments where harmony was valued above authenticity, where being agreeable kept things calm, where being helpful earned approval. And when those patterns repeat enough times, the nervous system links two things together. Approval equals safety. Disapproval equals danger. So when you begin to set boundaries as an adult, your nervous system reacts. Not because the boundary is wrong, but because the boundary threatens that old safety rule. If someone feels disappointed, if someone questions your decision, if someone becomes upset, your nervous system interprets that as a threat of connection. And guilt appears immediately, not as a logical thought, as a physical sensation. A tight chest, a heavy stomach, an urge to fix the situation. That sensation is your body saying, restore harmony. But here's the problem. Restoring harmony at the expense of yourself creates another pattern, self-abandonment. You override your needs, you override your limits, you override your intuition. And over time, that creates exhaustion. Not just physical exhaustion, emotional exhaustion. Because every time you abandon your own boundary, your system feels the split. You know what you needed. You didn't honor it. And that gap between knowing and doing slowly erodes self-trust. Energy Body 3 is where the gap becomes visible. The positive mind governs decision integrity. It asks a simple but powerful question. Do your actions match your awareness? When awareness and action align, authority grows. When awareness and action separate, guilt grows louder. Not because guilt is correct, but because the old conditioning is being challenged. Universal Year One amplifies this tension. Year One is about identity, who you are becoming, what patterns you carry forward. And the nervous system does not update identity through intention. It updates identity through repeated behavior. So every time you override guilt and honor your boundary, your identity shifts slightly. You move from, I must keep everyone happy, to, I can remain kind without abandoning myself. That shift is subtle, but it is powerful. Let's pause here for a moment. If you're listening, notice what happens in your body when you imagine disappointing someone. Just imagine it. Maybe a friend feeling upset, a family member questioning your decision, a colleague reacting with frustration. Notice the sensation. The reaction is exactly what we're working with today. Not eliminating guilt entirely, but learning how to recognize it without letting it control your choices. Because guilt is not a command, it's a signal, and signals can be examined, not automatically obeyed. Let's clear something up. Guilt is not always the enemy. Healthy guilt exists for a reason. Healthy guilt appears when your behavior violates your values. For example, if you lie to someone intentionally, if you hurt someone knowingly, if you betray your integrity, that form of guilt is a signal saying something here needs repair. And that signal is useful. It helps guide ethical behavior. But most of the guilt people feel around boundaries is not healthy guilt. It's conditioned guilt. Conditioned guilt appears when you break an old rule, even if that rule was never fair to begin with. Rules like you must always be available. You must not upset people. You must help when asked. You must keep the peace. These rules were often learned early and reinforced repeatedly. So when you step outside them, your nervous system reacts, not because you did something wrong, but because you violated the conditioning. So let's look at some examples. You tell somebody, I'm not available tonight, I need to rest. And immediately guilt appears. Not because resting is wrong, but because the old rule says you should help when asked. The guilt is not about ethics, it's about breaking the patterns. Another example, you tell someone, I can't take on that project, and they respond with disappointment. Your mind says you're letting them down. But the deeper question is, are you violating your values? Or are you simply prioritizing your capacity? Those are very different things. Energy Body 3 strengthens when you learn to pause in these moments. Instead of reacting automatically to guilt, you ask yourself, is this guilt about integrity or about conditioning? That question creates space, and space allows choice. Let's walk through a simple framework. Healthy guilt usually involves clear harm, violation of a personal value, the need to repair or apologize. Conditioned guilt usually involves someone else's disappointment, breaking an expectation, prioritizing your own needs, or changing an old pattern. Notice the difference? One is about accountability. The other is about identity change. Universal Year One makes the distinction incredibly important because Year One builds a new identity cycle. It asks you to define what behavior reflects the person I am becoming. If you continue obeying conditioned guilt, the old identity stays intact. But if you question it, pause with it, and sometimes move through it, something shifts. Your identity evolves. And this is where many people hesitate, because moving through conditioned guilt often means someone else feels uncomfortable. They may question you. They may react. They may even need time to adjust. But their adjustment does not mean your decision was wrong. It simply means the relationship dynamic is changing. This is one of the most powerful shifts you can make. Understanding that guilt does not always mean stop. Sometimes it simply means something new is happening, something unfamiliar, something outside the old pattern. And unfamiliar does not mean unsafe. Now that we've separated healthy guilt from conditioned guilt, the real question becomes, what do you do when guilt appears anyway? Because it will, even when you understand the pattern, even when the boundary is reasonable, even when the decision is aligned. Your nervous system may still produce guilt automatically. That doesn't mean the decision was wrong. It simply means the conditioning hasn't fully rewired yet. Most people assume that the goal is to eliminate guilt completely before acting. But that's not how change works. If you wait until guilt disappears, you will stay inside the old pattern forever. Instead, the work is learning how to feel guilt without obeying it. That's a very different skill. So let's slow this down. Imagine you've just set a boundary. Maybe you told someone, I won't be available to help with that, or I need to take care of myself tonight, and immediately the feeling appears. That familiar weight in the chest, a sense of heaviness, a thought that says, you should just do it. That is the moment of training, not the boundary itself, the moment after. The first step is recognizing the sensation without reacting to it. Instead of immediately fixing the situation, pause, take a breath, notice the feeling. You might say to yourself internally, this is guilt. It's uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous. That simple acknowledgement shifts your relationship with the emotion. Instead of seeing guilt as a command, you see it as a signal, and signals can be observed. Next, you return to the body. When guilt activates, the nervous system often contracts. Your shoulders tighten. Your breath shortens. Your posture collapses. So gently counter that. Take a slower breath. Lengthen your spine. Feel your feet. Just like we practiced on the previous video. These small physical adjustments remind your nervous system that you are safe. And when the body stabilizes, the mind becomes clearer. Then remind yourself of the truth of the situation. Ask one question. Did I violate my values? If the answer is no, if you simply honored your capacity or your boundary, then the guilt is conditioning. And conditioning can be felt without being obeyed. This is where Energy Body 3 strengthens, because the positive mind holds direction despite emotional fluctuation. It says, I hear the feeling, but I'm staying with my decision. That is integrity, not rigidity. Let's talk about something important here. Moving through guilt does not mean you stop caring about people. It does not mean you become cold or detached. It means your care is no longer based on self-abandonment. You can still be kind. You can still be compassionate. You can still be supportive. But your kindness now includes yourself. Over time, something interesting happens. The guilt becomes quieter. Not because you suppressed it, because your nervous system learned that boundaries do not destroy connection. It learned that discomfort can exist without catastrophe. That learning rewires identity. And remember, we are in a universal year 1. This year is about establishing the foundation of the next 9-year cycle. The way you handle guilt now becomes a template your nervous system follows. Moving forward, if guilt always overrides your boundaries, that pattern continues. But if you begin moving through guilt, even gently, your identity begins to change. You become someone who can remain kind and clear, someone who can care and hold limits, someone who can feel emotional without being controlled by it. Let's take a moment to bring everything together, because today wasn't about eliminating guilt. It was about understanding it. Guilt is a powerful emotional signal, but not every signal is a command. Sometimes guilt simply appears because you are stepping outside a pattern that once kept relationships stable. A pattern where you said yes when you wanted to say no. A pattern where your comfort came after everyone else's. A pattern where harmony mattered more than honesty. Breaking those patterns will naturally create emotional resistance. Your nervous system is adjusting to a new way of being, and adjusting always brings sensation. But here is the truth that changes everything. Feeling guilt does not mean you are doing something wrong. Sometimes it means you are doing something new, something unfamiliar, something that challenges an old rule. And that moment, that uncomfortable moment, is where identity shifts. Universal Year 1 is asking you to become someone slightly different. Not someone harsh, not someone selfish, but someone clearer, someone who can remain kind without abandoning themselves, someone who can care deeply and still honor their limits, someone who understands that compassion includes the self. That is the identity Energy Body 3 is building. So as we move through the rest of this month, your practice is simple. When guilt appears, Pause, breathe, feel your body. Ask yourself, did I violate my values or did I simply honor my boundary? If you honored your boundary, allow the feeling to pass without changing your decision. Stay present for a few seconds longer than you used to. That small moment of steadiness rewires your nervous system, and those small moments, repeated over time, create profound change. So take a breath here with me. Feel the space around you. Feel the weight of your body. Let yourself recognize something simple but powerful. You are allowed to care about others, and you are allowed to care about yourself. Those two things are not in conflict. In fact, when they exist together, your relationships become healthier, clearer, more honest, and far less exhausting. Before we go, if this resonates, if you're feeling that inner yeses in your soul, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell so that you never miss a transmission. This channel isn't just content, it's a frequency, a sacred remembering, a space where you're called out and called home all in the same breath. So if you're ready to rise, to heal, to reclaim your truth, one video at a time, like this video, drop a fire or heart emoji in the comments, and let me know what landed for you. Let's co-create the new earth together, one soul at a time. Welcome to the remembrance. See you in the next video. Bye for now.